Welcome everybody to this week's podcast episode for the Financial Freedom for Physicians podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Christopher Liu. And as you know, I talk about four types of freedom: time, financial, location, health freedom. I'm always looking for people doing things outside the box and doing things on the cutting edge to give you inspiration, motivation to achieve those types of freedom. So today we have Andrea Wilson Woods, and she is comes from a very distinguished background. She's an author, speaker, entrepreneur. She's also a patient advocate. So she's going to talk all about her story, what she learned, and hopefully we can get a lot of inspiration from this conversation. So I'll let Andrea introduce herself. But so Andrea, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Liu. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I know we had met through Podmatch, and I found your bio very interesting, and I'm always trying to pick gems and try to give them a platform to share their stories, their messages. And so tell us more about yourself and how you got started.
Yes, of course. It goes back a long way, and it's amazing how one thing can just change the whole course of your life. So, when I was 22 years old, I was living in Los Angeles. I had graduated from USC, fight on for my Trojans, and I ended up getting custody of my then 8-year-old sister, Adrienne. So, we have the same mother, but different fathers. Her father had died before she was born, and our mother was a drug addict and had gotten to the point where it was unmanageable and she couldn't parent anymore. So I became my sister's parent. I became her legal guardian, and I raised her all through my 20s. 1 month after her 15th birthday, she was very unexpectedly diagnosed with stage 4 liver cancer. And it was really the day before she's fine, the next day, this is the news that we get from an ER doctor. And that was 20 years ago, actually 21 years ago. And her cancer journey lasted 147 days. It was really short. It was really brutal. There was really nothing that could be done. And raising her, getting custody of her changed the whole course of my life, but then losing her to cancer changed my life again. And for your listeners, for context, the year after my sister died, I turned 30 years old. And I just did not know what to do with myself anymore. I was suicidal. I was looking for a way to channel my grief. I didn't want people to go through what my sister and I had gone through, where there just wasn't very much support or very much even known about the type of cancer she had, even though it's quite common. And so I started a national nonprofit called Blue Faery, the Adrienne Wilson Liver Cancer Association. And Blue Faery's mission is to prevent, treat, and cure primary liver cancer, specifically hepatocellular carcinoma, through research, education, advocacy. And then fast forward many years, I am also the co-founder and CEO of Cancer University. That's an online platform for all kinds of cancer for patients and caregivers to really educate, empower, and engage them to become advocates in their healthcare. It's so essential that you as the patient drive the train. No offense, not the doctor. you know, the doctor's on your team, or doctors are on your team, but you're the one in charge of your body and your health, and you really have to learn those skills. And I find most people are not natural advocates, but they can be if they get the right teaching.
Interesting. Well, it's a very powerful journey and a powerful story, and
Thank you.
you know, you brought up a lot of interesting ideas, but one thing that you mentioned was patient advocacy. Uh, I'm a physician. The healthcare system is a mess, and what I'm interested in is what sort of skills can you learn as to be a patient advocate?
Yeah, so being a patient advocate means, in terms of the way I look at it, is understanding that you as an individual have to take charge of your health. No one's going to do it for you. And that includes really practical, tactical things like how to stay organized, um, to more, to vaguer things like what are your values? You know, I don't know, I've never had a doctor ask me what my core values are, but your core values and what's important to you, which does change as you get older, can really determine what types of treatment you're willing to try or endure. And, a 23-year-old is going to be looking at the life she has ahead of her very differently than maybe an 83-year-old. And so it's a combination of things, but the most important part is the understanding that you have to take charge, that no one's going to do it for you.
Hmm. That's quite interesting. Yeah, I know a lot of patients, they feel lost, and really the whole healthcare system is really convoluted and hard to
Yes,
navigate.
very much so.
So yeah, and so kudos to you to starting this and really addressing a really important need for patients in today's healthcare system. So I know you had talked about one is I know you've published a book, your medical memoir, Better Off Bald, and which I encourage the audience to go and check it out on Amazon. And one thing is talk about this idea of love beyond loss, because you describe this thing where you channel your grief and sort of create beauty out of ashes. So tell us more about that.
Well, I forget who said it. Someone else said it, not me, but it's it's something like death ends a life, not a relationship. And that was really helpful for me because I lost not only my sister, I lost my child, and I lost the most important person in my life. I loved my sister and still do unconditionally, and the bond we had was incredibly intense. And it's become so important to me to honor her by not only founding a nonprofit and co-founding a health tech startup, but also sharing her story. And it's a great way for people to get to know her as well. So as you said, I wrote a medical memoir. It is about the 7 years of my life in my 20s when I raised my sister, but the book is structured around her cancer journey. So it's written like a journal. For example, day one is chapter one. And my sister was also, even at a young age, a very prolific writer. And she had a journal that she kept, that she started before she ever got sick, but continued to write in it after she became ill. So by day three, the chapters open with her words and her point of view. And so you get to see her point of view as a very young patient, a teenager battling a metastatic cancer. And you also see my point of view as the caregiver and the parent, which really diverged at times, incredibly so. I think I answered your question. I'm not 100% sure, but I think I did, but it's important for us to share our stories. At the end, we all become a story.
Yeah. Yeah, at the end of the day, we're all headed to the same destination. And really, it's interesting that you talk about changing the world by channeling your grief and living courageously through adversity. Um, One question is, what should one do when they're overwhelmed by grief? Do you have any suggestions for those people, either initially or just during or after?
Well, I think this is common advice, but don't make any drastic decisions. That's not always the best time to make drastic decisions. And it's really difficult to do, but you need to sort of live in the overwhelm and don't stuff it down and don't push it away. That whole first year after my sister died, I really tried hard, overly so, to please people and to assure them I was going to be okay. And I was faking it the entire year. I was just faking it. And it got to this point where I sort of had a breakdown where I just couldn't fake it anymore and I couldn't pretend to be okay, especially as I watched my friends move on with their lives. I sort of lost track of how many people got married and had babies in that first year or two after my sister died, but it was a lot of people. And that was really difficult for me because that part of my life, parenthood, was over. And I like to say I lived my life in reverse. I was a parent in my 20s, I got married in my 30s, and I'm an entrepreneur and an author in my 40s. So I was on a different track than my friends were, and that was really difficult. And I ultimately ended up losing every friend I had, every single one. And that's what my next book is about, the time in my 30s when I was grieving, when I started my nonprofit, and also just losing all of these friendships.
Hmm. And was the when you mentioned losing friendships, was it just because losing touch, or just because their values did not resonate with yours?
There was only one friendship that I purposely ended, only one. And it just got to the point where I didn't feel like it was good for me anymore. And I was very upfront, and I had a conversation with my friend, and I still to this day very much love her, but it just the friendship had was not good anymore. As for my other friends, in most instances, I don't know what happened. And that was the worst part because they just stopped talking to me. They just disappeared. Um, yeah, it's as I'm going through my notes and emails and as part of my process for writing my next book, it really is upsetting because I don't know what happened, except that losing my sister forever changed me. I think my core personality is still the same, but it forever changed me. It changed how I looked at things. Um, and I don't think that was easy for people. So after that first year when I was done faking it and I came out of it and I was like, I'm I'm not I'm not okay, I'm not okay. And I think for some of my friends that was too much for them, that
Mm,
they liked it better when I was okay because I was the friend who organized everything. I was the friend who brought all these people who would never be friends if it weren't for me, right? I brought all these people together. I was sort of the leader of my group, and I couldn't do that anymore for people. I couldn't. And there's a lot written out there about losing a spouse or having a breakup or if your child dies, but there's not a whole lot out there about losing friends. And it it was devastating. Not as devastating as losing my sister, but it was devastating.
mm. It's that's very well said. And I think you grew and you learned from this experience. And now you talk about so one thing, we're coming closer to the end of the conversation, is your nonprofit, um named in memory of your sister. What services does Blue Faery provide for liver cancer patients and caregivers?
So I think I said Blue Fairy's mission is prevent, treat, and cure primary liver cancer through research, education, advocacy. So we have an annual research award that we give out to healthcare providers or scientists, researchers who are very narrowly focused on what's the acronym is called HCC, hepatocellular carcinoma. For patients and families, we have patient resource guides that are free. We ship anywhere worldwide as long as we have a valid address. Those are updated every other year or so. They are in multiple languages and available as a PDF download on our website. We also have a private community for patients and caregivers that is truly private, HIPAA compliant, not on Facebook, and they really interact with each other and get support there. And then another, a lot of other programs and activities. We have a Love Your Liver, which is it's not just annual, it's many times a year program where we focus on the prevention piece of our mission. And we want to raise awareness on not only liver cancer, but liver disease, because in most cases, liver cancer is preceded by some type of liver disease.
Hmm. Yeah. And yeah, there's so, like, I love your mission. And you know finally concluding, what do you hope to achieve with your new endeavor, Cancer University? What product services do you provide that will help the cancer community?
Our goal is to help people at that moment of diagnosis, because that's when we can make the biggest difference, and to change every person's cancer journey. We're not saying we can cure it, but we feel like we can change it. And if you are active, engaged, and educated as a patient and a family member from the beginning, you are likely to make different decisions than you would otherwise. It's really interesting, and I'm sure you know this, but there are many studies that show that doctors often give advice to patients that they wouldn't take themselves, especially if you're treating an end-stage cancer. And there's nothing wrong with trying every single treatment and going all the way to the end. And in fact, I'm a huge proponent and advocate of clinical trials. But there are some situations where that might not be in the best interest of the patient based on what's important to them. So my step grandfather, for example, he had head and neck cancer, misdiagnosed. By the time it was properly diagnosed, he had a tumor the size of a lemon removed from his neck. They also had to take his ear, and that was the good ear. So when he woke up, he was essentially deaf, and he was 82. And he decided not to do chemotherapy or radiation. And that was not an easy decision because he had two women, my step grandmother and stepmother, who were not happy about it. But he just felt like that wasn't what was best for him. And he had lived 82 years and he was happy about that. And it turned out to be the right decision, if there is a right or wrong, because the cancer came right back. The chemo and radiation wouldn't have done anything for him. But allowing him to have and make that decision on his own and come to peace with it, he entered hospice. He got to say goodbye to his child. He got to say goodbye to his grandchildren. He got to say goodbye to his great-grandchildren. There was a lot of time that was allowed. It was only a couple of months, but he got to say his goodbyes and whatever else he needed to do. And he died peacefully in his bed at home, with my step grandmother and stepmother, with his wife and his daughter right there by his side. I can't think of a better way to die if you have a really serious disease. I don't think anyone wants to die in the hospital. I've certainly never met anyone who wants to die in the hospital. And so I feel like it's really important to help people at that moment of diagnosis.
This has been a really very profound conversation, and really touch upon what is the meaning of life, and how can we best make use of our time here, and how can we best use adversity to make an impact for society and for others and our family. So I know this message will resonate and touch a lot of people in the audience. How can they, I know you have your book on Amazon, you have tell us your website and how to follow you and contact you.
Sure. So it's really easy. My personal website is andreawilsonwoods.com. You can go to my book's website, which is betteroffbald.com, and see all the sellers if you don't like to shop at Amazon. For my nonprofit, it's Blue Faery, BLUEFAERY.org. And then for Cancer University, it's cancer.university.
Excellent. And for all the listeners and audience out there, Andrea's resources will be in the links and show notes. And thanks so much for a fantastic conversation, really the bird's eye eagle view of why we're all here. And thanks so much. And we look forward to hearing about your future success.
Thank you so much, Dr. Liu, for having me on.